The Ain't No Fang Podcast. From Arizona Sports, Ain't No Fang.
Hey guys, welcome into the Ain't No Fang Podcast with Arizona Sports. I'm Alex Weiner, joined by Diamondbacks pregame and postgame host on the radio station. That's Steve Zinsmeister, and boy, we are in the last weekend of the regular season. It feels kind of odd to say that the season is just about over, but we'll see how far it extends into October, because the Diamondbacks have an opportunity to clinch a postseason spot here at Chase Field this weekend, but of course, they're going to have to take care of some business because they're in a virtual tie with the Mets for the second wildcard spot. They're a game up on the Atlanta Braves for the third wildcard spot. And, the Braves and the Mets have a doubleheader on Monday that kind of throws just a wrench into everything, because the D-backs have 3 games left, the Mets and Braves both have 5 games left, and we may be in a scenario where we don't know if the Diamondbacks play in the postseason by the end of their regular season, which is definitely a bit unique, and so we'll see what happens. But Steve, how are you as we enter this final weekend of the season?
Yeah, no, it's funny how everything comes down to the last few days, isn't it, Alex? It's great to talk with you, so thanks for having me. It feels like just yesterday, you and I were roaming the Salt River fields, and it feels like this is so far away, and in reality, you start to come to the realization of how important each of those games is throughout the course of the year. I mean, even just look at the tiebreaker situations, right? Where you get to the end of all things and the Diamondbacks don't really have a lot of helpful tiebreakers, really only one, and it's over the Padres. And that only comes into play if you sweep them. And if you sweep them, you don't really have to worry about the tiebreaker so much because you're already in. So it just kind of takes you back to a lot of different points in the season, and you realize how impactful those games are, even though here at the end, these games feel like a playoff scenario.
Yeah, this is absolutely a playoff series between the Diamondbacks and the Padres, but you're totally right, because it's like, okay, every game is a must-win game, right? But then you look back at April. Remember when they were in Atlanta and they were swept and they had late leads and there was some defensive problems, and like, who knows if they lose out to the Braves by 1 game and you look back at that series and they don't have the tiebreaker against Atlanta, it's like, well, if they had won those 2. So like, every game is a must win, even if it feels bigger now, but it is interesting to look back at those specific matchups, like where could that have possibly flipped? But be that as it may, 3 games against the San Diego Padres. If, as Steve mentioned, if they sweep, they're in, because they'll have 91 wins, they'll have the tiebreaker over the Padres, and both the Mets and the Braves can't get to 91 wins because they play each other. So the Padres are not going to be division champs because they lost to the Dodgers on Thursday night. So that takes 1 carrot away from the Padres coming into the series. However, they could use a win to solidify the top wildcard spot, get to host the wildcard series. And so there's nothing to play for, and that is seen tonight in the pitching matchup, because the Diamondbacks are rolling with their co-ace in Merrill Kelly, and the Padres actually moved up Yu Darvish to get this first start. So, Steve, what do the Diamondbacks need from Merrill Kelly? I know it's going to be hot out there. It's at Chase Field. He's had some cramping stuff like happened last year, but he has been quite dynamite when he's been on the mound, at least these last few starts.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly nobody you would want on the mound the last 2 games than Zach Gallen and Merrill Kelly. And so in that sense, it's coming at a good time. Now, it also kind of on the flip side means you're not going to have those 2 guys available to you in the final 2 games of the season if it comes down to those games. But we'll get there when we get there, right? Let's cross that bridge when we come to it. For now, what it means is the Padres are going all out, in particular tonight, with moving up Yu Darvish, who's been super hot over the last couple of weeks. And so this is the premier matchup of the 3 games. Now, we'll see what tomorrow holds and what Sunday holds. I'm not even sure if I've seen the probables for the Padres just yet. I think we can make some assumptions. But the Diamondbacks, they're getting Ryan Nelson back this weekend. He's eligible. I don't anticipate we'll see him today, but I guess there's a chance. So they've got some decisions to make from a pitching standpoint as well. But you're right about Merrill Kelly. He's been fantastic the last couple of outings. His last 2, really, if you add them together, have been fantastic. But the cramping's been an issue. My understanding is that he's been going through a lot behind the scenes to try to be at his best so that the cramping isn't an issue. That's really good to hear. I mean, he's taking it as seriously as he possibly can. Nobody wants him out there for 6-7 innings more than him. So I think that tonight's game should be interesting. And like you mentioned, the Padres are really incentivized to win one game so that they can solidify that top spot. So if for some reason the Diamondbacks do end up losing this game one in the series, the silver lining is maybe the Padres have a little bit less to play for in games 2 and 3.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think after last night's game, Padres players, the manager, like telling reporters, like they're still like, this is a playoff series coming up in Arizona for them. So there's motivation there. The Diamondbacks and Padres have had some pretty darn good battles all season long. That's why the tiebreaker is up for grabs in this series at home. But the Diamondbacks are going to have to sweep them if they want to overtake them. We'll get into a bit more playoff scenarios. I guess we can jump into that now. So 3 wins and you're in. That's like the easiest, cleanest way you can do it. If the Diamondbacks sweep the Padres, they'll be in the postseason and maybe host a wild card round. It depends on what happens with the Mets because the Mets have the tiebreaker. If the Mets win out, let's say, and the Diamondbacks win out, the Mets would host the Diamondbacks in Queens for the wild card series. But that, at least takes care of that. Like, you don't have to worry about Monday's doubleheader, which we'll get into, could be a disaster for the Diamondbacks depending on where things line up. If the Diamondbacks win 2 games, that gets them to 90 wins. That also kind of keeps their odds pretty decent. But the way that, and again, I was like last night after the Padres lost the Dodgers, I was just like looking at this for like hours trying to figure out, okay, if they win 2 games, then this happens. If they win 1 game, then this happens. If they get swept, oh boy. But if they win 2 and they finish with 90 wins, essentially what they need are 4 more losses between the Mets and the Braves. 2 of those losses will be on Monday's doubleheader, right? So if the Diamondbacks, let's say they win the first 2 games against San Diego, and the Braves lose the first 2 games against Kansas City, that's it. That'll do it. They'll make the postseason on Saturday. That's the earliest that can happen. Or if the Diamondbacks win 2 games against San Diego, the Mets win 2 out of 3 against Milwaukee, and the Braves win 2 out of 3 against Kansas City, then the Diamondbacks get in, because then both the Mets and the Braves, they can't both get to 90 wins. They would be at 89 wins and 88 wins going into the doubleheader. So that will just be a playoff, 2-game series between the 2 of them. So those are the kind of like the 2. And that doesn't guarantee the Diamondbacks get in if they get to 90 wins, obviously. Like if the Braves sweep and the Mets sweep, then, the Diamondbacks are in real trouble. But that's sort of the clearest way that they'll make the postseason this weekend, is if either you sweep or you win 2 and each of those teams lose 1, or the Braves lose 2 or something like that. Then you kind of get into like what happens if the Diamondbacks only win 1. It gets a lot more tenuous there. And if they get swept, then they would need the Mets to lose out, the Braves to go 1-4 or 0-5. Then that seems pretty unlikely. So kind of throwing all of that out at you. And I know it like rattled my brain a little bit last night. Kind of what are your first thoughts about their clinching scenarios?
Yeah, I know you have a deep dive at Arizonasports.com on this. So if anybody's having trouble following along, I suppose that's the best way that they can go back and reconfirm what they think they know. Basically, the way that I've been dumbing this down for my own purposes, because I have a hard time keeping track of 1 team, let alone 3, right? So the basis of this is, like you said, you sweep, you're in. You don't have to worry about anything. So that's like best case scenario for the Diamondbacks. 2 wins, the way I've been describing this, is basically we might be sitting there after the game on Sunday with 2 wins in the series thinking to ourselves, okay, we feel good and that we're in, but we just got to wait. And that never happens on the last game of the year. I mean, you're literally in a situation where you might not clinch a playoff spot after a game at all. And that's weird. And then 1 win, of course, you need a lot of help. And then if you get swept in this series, there is a way, like you mentioned, to get in, which is baffling to me. But you basically need the world to collapse for the Mets and the Braves. So it's tough. It's like I mentioned earlier, you don't have those helpful tiebreakers over the Mets or the Braves, and those would have made their scenarios much, much more simple. So it's just baffling that we might get to Monday and the Diamondbacks might be sitting on a plane on the tarmac waiting to find out where they need to take off. Which direction do we head, right? Or do we just start heading west, and if we got to take a turn to Milwaukee, so be it. But it's weird. This never happens, and I guess we have Mother Nature to thank for that.
Where do you think they watch the game if it like comes down to Monday? Do you think, because they're probably not going to watch the game from the plane, right? Or maybe it's like, I don't even know where you would even do that, because you got to go pretty quickly.
Don't know. Yeah, I don't know. My guess is that, all the players and everybody meets up at the stadium to begin with, and then you got to take the bus over to the airport, right? Yeah. So would you watch the game at the ballpark? And then you get into this too. What if the results of the first game are really all that matters? Right. And now, game one ends, you can go. Or what if you need to wait for game two, and all of a sudden in the third inning, one team is up by 10? Do you feel confident enough that you can jump on the plane and start flying to wherever you're going? It's a whole mess of issues, Alex. And I know that MLB as a league definitely would have preferred things to go another way. We can't predict the weather. I mean, as much as we can predict hurricanes, I guess. But this is a scenario that I don't know that we've ever encountered before, where we had to play a makeup doubleheader. And the fact that one of the games that was rescheduled was a game from April that was rescheduled, and they decided not to play it over the course of 3.5, 4 months on an off day, and instead decided, let's just tack it on to that end of the series in Atlanta at the end of the year.
Yeah.
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong? And here we are basically waiting on the Mets and the Braves to conclude their series. So I don't know. It's a great question. I have no idea where the players will physically be, but my guess is there will probably be some sort of communal event at Chase Field on Monday where we're deciding if and where the Diamondbacks might be heading.
Yeah, it might be one of those deals where it's like the March Madness, like the videos of all the teams at like their coach's house, like watching the TV, and they hear their names, and then you just see them go crazy. Like, do they do like a mini champagne shower if they clinch that way, and then just like go, we gotta go? So I don't know. I guess we'll figure that out. What is that's an interesting situation though, but also at the same time, and not to put like a damper on the possibility of a micro champagne shower or something like that, if this gets to Monday and the Diamondbacks have not clinched, they're kind of in trouble because of how it lines up, right? So to go over the matchups this weekend, the Braves are hosting the Kansas City Royals, and the Mets are in Milwaukee. The Brewers have absolutely nothing to play for. They are the third division winner. They've won the Central. That's it. That is their seed. They cannot catch the Phillies. They cannot catch the Dodgers. They're going to host the third wild card over and out. So how they manage the workloads of their pitchers and their position players, that's kind of up to their discretion, because they don't have to win any of these games. Frankie Montas is going to go in game one. So at least they've had somebody who's pitched pretty well going for them in that first game. Maybe that's the best chance you have to catch the Mets, but it'll be interesting to see how they manage that. The Braves play the Royals. The Royals' magic number is 1 to clinch an AL wildcard spot, partially because the Twins lost in like 13 innings to the Marlins last night, lost 2 out of 3 to the Marlins at home with their season on the line. So because of that, if the Twins lose today or the Royals win today, that's over and out, right? So the pitching match will be Brady Singer for the Royals and Max Fried for the Braves. This feels like the best chance that the Diamondbacks have to see a Braves loss this series, because of the fact that, the Royals just may not have anything else really to play for other than whether they're the 5th seed or the 6th seed over the next couple days. So those kind of go against the Diamondbacks in that regard. Getting to Monday, you kind of have a tricky situation, right? Because if they have not clinched by then, you might be looking at a scenario where either the Mets or Braves could clinch by winning the first game and then just kind of packing it in for the second game, in which the other team could clinch. Or if one team has already clinched and the other one needs 2 wins, they might be playing the B team of the other squad. So that makes it a little bit more complicated if they don't get to Monday.
And this is why Major League Baseball schedules the last game of the season on Sunday at the exact same time, so that this exact thing does not happen. And here we are, Alex. It's happening. Yeah, it's weird in pretty much every way, shape, and form. There are two teams in the Mets and the Braves who are going to be playing multiple games on a day where it was supposed to be an off day. Mm-hmm. And, they might have to play two and then the next day start a playoff series. At least one of them will.